This week on the Orange Box podcast, we talk about SteamOS coming to other PC handhelds, CoPilot for gaming coming to Xbox, the release date for Death Stranding 2, and more. All of this tonight, but first, on to that beautiful bean intro. Welcome to the place where PC and console gaming talk combine. This is the Orange Box Podcast, episode 76. I'm your host, the part Irish man who was turned down for the role of St. Patrick because he is too white, Nathan, also known as the Frozen Gamer 87. And joining me, as always, the man who will be portraying Black St. Patrick in the upcoming Disney musical biopic, Justin, better known as I Am Zaracon. How you doing today? How's your week been?
Well, I'm a bit surprised because I actually thought I was going to be the part of the Netflix adaptation, but I guess Disney bought me out first.
Yeah, it's one of those.
Yeah. But so last week I mentioned that I was waiting for a cable to arrive. And Saturday it came in as I was expecting. However, upon opening it up and trying to plug it into my GameCube, I realized that it didn't match. And so looking back at it and looking at the listing, I think I understand what they meant was it's a Wii component cable, but if you play GameCube games on the Wii, it works for that. So
yeah,
I had to go ahead and buy a third-party one. Fortunately, it wasn't too expensive on Amazon. I bought a third-party one, but I swallowed it the purchase and bought one, and it arrived today. So unfortunately, I did not have time to actually do the recordings that I wanted to do and even try out everything that I wanted to try out. But at the very least, I was able to get things set up where I can record now because I had to buy a whole new separate capture card since I'm not using HDMI or anything like that. So that's I also had to jump through several different hoops just because it's an older piece of hardware that doesn't necessarily have the drivers that originally would have available. But that's all good and dandy now, so I'll probably start that up for my next video in the coming days and whatnot. Other stuff. So today I was surprised and got to see my niece and nephew. Yeah, it's been a while since I got to see them. So I mean, granted, I was technically working because I was just working from home, but I got to, well, they were trying to play with me while I had my computer in my lap, and trying to get that stuff done. Trying to show me everything on their tablets and stuff, and trying to navigate them both trying to sit on my lap and also have the laptop in one hand at the same time. So it was a challenge, but it was a good time seeing them today. And yeah, I don't think anything too noteworthy to discuss, I think.
Everybody doing okay?
Yeah, everyone's doing fine. I did have a couple relatives who sent me some text messages today asking about how everyone's doing in the family, and I was just saying, we're doing well. I know my mom, she was going to have I think this was going to be I can't remember if it was because I know she alternated between different meetings she had, if it was a women's Bible study group or if it was a grief share group. I can't remember which one it was, but I know that because the twins we were with the twins and stuff, that she wasn't able to do that. But I think that spending the time with them was very necessary, and I would say it would be the biggest thing and whatnot. And
definitely,
I know that with their birthday coming up this week, that him not being there is going to be something. They'll notice that.
And am I remembering right that they're like turning 4 or 5 this year?
5.
5, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking they were 4, but I couldn't quite remember. So glad I basically remembered. So okay. Well, obviously we're praying for you all in this time.
Thank you.
As far as my week goes, so where do I start? I mean, obviously, I guess I should note for anybody who didn't already figure this out, we're recording this on Monday the 17th instead of Wednesday, just due to the fact that I'm doing my 24-hour stream on Friday, and I don't want to be risking the possibility of staying up way too late editing on Thursday. So we're doing it on Monday this week instead, but it'll probably still come out Friday morning. I haven't decided. I might have it go out Wednesday. I haven't quite decided. Anyway, regardless of any of that, in terms of my week and in general. So, of course, obviously, last week I mentioned about getting my PC parts, and everything came earlier than I was expecting. The motherboard and the fan for the CPU, as well as the RAM, all came by Friday. And I was working from home Friday, but I couldn't actually do anything with it until I was done with work for the day. Really, it wasn't until after I made dinner, and then we had dinner, and then I started working on it. And as so I got a portion of it done. Like, I got the old motherboard. Got everything unhooked. The old motherboard out. Got the M2 SSD out, or the NVMe SSD into the new motherboard. Got the new CPU fan put on, and the RAM slotted. Got the board in, and then I was having all sorts of issues because the board that I had picked was a Gigabyte board, which is laid out completely different from the Asus board. And some of the plugs for the fans are like at the bottom of the board instead of being at the top. And the USB 3.0 port, instead of being upright to where you just put it down in, it was on the side, but it was like at the bottom on the side. And instead of having like short pins that are easy to get into, it had long gold pins, the ones that are like really flexible and bend really easily. The other thing is that this was a used like new board, which wasn't a good plan on my part. I'll get to why that wasn't worked out, because it looked fine. Everything looked fine. Everything looked nice. But among other things, the USB 3.0 port was the biggest problem. But apart from that, it was just the way everything was laid out was different, and so it was harder for me to get stuff plugged in, especially because the way my cables were run through my case, and I didn't want to have to completely pull everything out and then try to reconfigure everything, because it was just like it was laid out a certain way. It was just a huge pain in the butt. So to top it all off, we had really bad windstorms, and one of the transformers in our power grid went out, which meant our power was out for over an hour. So it was dark. I was trying to work on it. We didn't have any light, so I'm basically like trying to use the flashlight for my phone, or like the emergency light that we have for our safe room, which we have for tornadoes and everything. And the only reason why I'm continuing to try to do this is because I'm trying to get it done before the kids go to bed and everything, so that after that I can just hang out with the wife, because we usually hang out on Friday night and watch a movie and so on and so forth. But the other thing was that I just didn't want to leave the parts out, because I was doing it on the kitchen table, and I didn't want the cats to get into it and lose screws and everything else. And so I was just like, okay, I need to get this done. And so I'm working on it. Eventually the power comes back on, probably around 9 or so. I think it was out for hour and a half, give or take. And then I was able to finish putting everything together. But since I hadn't been able to figure out where that USB 3.0 port was, because my cable wasn't fitting in that slot properly. I just thought, okay, well, I must be remembering wrong that I have to have this cable plugged in. So I'm trying to figure everything out. I couldn't tell you what exactly the issues were that I had all across the board, but I could not get it working. And this is not the first time I built PCs several times. I've taken apart and put back together the PC several times between my own main PC and the secondary PC I built. This wasn't something that was completely new. It was just, yes, the board was laid out differently. It took more finagling to get some things plugged in. Some cables I had to plug in completely different spots from where I would normally plug in because of the location of the plugs, and it was annoying. But I could not get this thing to start up. I couldn't get any power to it whatsoever. It was not turning on. I could be wrong on the matter, but basically, at the end of after a while, I just finally said, okay, I'm not going to do anything else with this tonight. I'm not going to be able to figure it out. So I stopped. We hung out, watched our stuff and everything. Then when she was ready to go to bed, I decided, okay, I'm going to try to get this taken care of. Really, initially I was trying to see if I could get it working. I couldn't figure it out. When I figured out where that USB 3.0 port was, I took a closer look at it and saw that the contacts were bent in there, which very well could have been. It could be that those contacts being bent were causing a short to keep it from starting up. I'm not positive if that was the reason why it wasn't starting up, but it was definitely a problem. And of course, the fact that the contacts are the way they are doesn't make any sense. Like, because I've used Asus boards otherwise, and the Asus boards I've used all have like very short, very firm, like steel contacts in them, and so those contacts are like, it's difficult to get them bent, very difficult to get them bent. And so, yeah, I think that may have just been causing a short. I'm not positive. I know that when I got the packaging, everything looked fine, but I didn't get a close look at that port until I was trying to figure it out. And when I figured out that was the right port, it's like, I looked in there, I was like, oh, these contacts are bent. And they were to the point where it's like, there was no way I was going to be able to fix it. So I ended up just initiating return, and I put my old parts back in my computer. And then in the morning, I just, the rest of the day, I just used my existing parts. Of course, it took me way less time to put it back together because I know where everything goes, and because the Asus board is laid out in a way that makes a lot more sense. But yeah, so right after that, once I decided to return that one, I went ahead and just ordered another Asus board. Basically just the newer version of what I already had. So it was laid out exactly the same, except that it had a couple of pluses added to it because they made it a bit easier to work with, being able to put more NVMe drives in. And I think it has at least 3, maybe 4 slots for NVMe drives, which is really nice because the one that I had been using only had 1 slot. So took care of that, and I had it set up to where the board would be arriving on Saturday. So, the same day that I ordered it. And at the same time that I did that, I went ahead and just decided, well, because of the fact that I kept losing motherboard screws over the years, I just ordered a box that had like a ton of screws and everything else in it, as well as spacers and everything for the motherboard so that I could do all that. So ended up being ultimately more of a blessing than not, but we sent back the old motherboard today, and that should be it said it could take up to 14 days to get a refund, but either way, it was just like, yeah, the thing was used, the packaging was torn when I got it, and if they try to fight me on it, I'm going to say this thing was not working, and I had no problems with the next board I got it working without a problem. I mean, I did have a couple of problems initially, but the funny thing is the first problem that I had with it was not even, I mean, was something so simple and obvious, and it was stupid that I made the mistake. It was that I forgot to actually plug in the CPU to the motherboard, the power for the CPU from, let's see here, so because I plugged the power into the power supply, but I didn't plug the cables from the power supply into the motherboard. So that was the only reason why I was having problems initially. And then after I did that, it's like, okay, it boots up, and was able to go from there. The monitor came actually on Saturday, which was a very pleasant surprise. So I was able to use that before I was even able to completely build the computer, because I should say I got the new motherboard I got Saturday evening. It was probably around like 7:30 or something. I just decided not to do anything with it because I wanted to like really hang out with my wife, since I didn't get to do it the night before as much and was a little preoccupied mentally. So I put that together Sunday afternoon. But the monitor, just as a refresher, is a 1440p OLED monitor with HDR, 240 hertz, and this thing is beautiful. It's so nice. It's like I didn't realize. I mean, like, I know that OLED screens are better, but like I'd gotten used to my 240 hertz 1080p monitor that's just an LCD screen. Like I liked it for a long. I always liked it, but man, the difference between these is just night and day. It's like so much nicer. And like games look better. Even when I was running stuff on my older hardware before I upgraded everything, the games looked way better. And it was just like, wow, this is super cool. And so, let's see here. Just trying to make sure I'm not forgetting anything here on that front. Okay, so some other things that happened with the computer that have been a mix of happy and sad. Well, I mean, mostly just frustrations and everything. It was basically all just stuff that I did wrong, is really all it was. I'll get into the actual like game specific stuff, but basically the short version is I wasn't getting the performance boosts I was looking for in some games, and while some of that could certainly have been an issue of just how poorly the game is made, it was also an issue of I made a mistake when it came to putting the PC back together. So basically what it was is that, when I initially built on that the Gigabyte motherboard, I'd put down the thermal paste, on the CPU for the fan. When I had to take it apart, I thought, well, I think it'll be okay for me to not have to reapply thermal paste. That was not a good choice. And so my CPU was definitely getting hotter than it should have been. And like, I've never monitored CPU temperatures, but like I was trying to figure out why things were just not performing the way I wanted them to. And it seemed like that was a likely culprit, or at least part of the issue. So I ended up, because of that, this morning, before work, I went ahead and just opened up my computer again and pulled off CPU, cleaned off the thermal paste. Thankfully, So I cleaned off the thermal paste, and I thought that I still had enough left in the tube that came with I think it came with the CPU. It either came with the CPU or the fan. I can't remember which. So I was just going to use that. So I start squeezing it out. It's like there's almost nothing in there. It's basically solidified. So it's no. This is probably not going to work real well. And so I'm kind of like, oh no, not now, please no, especially not when it's early in the morning. I can't go anywhere to pick some up. And so like I'm trying to remember if I still have some somewhere, because I thought I had a tube somewhere from the last time that I upgraded my CPU and everything, because I had to run out and get some more, and there just happened to be a place in my small town that was actually open that actually had the thermal paste. And initially I couldn't think of where it was, and then I remembered looking out in the garage because I had used some when I built that secondary PC, and thankfully I found I had an unopened tube, was able to use that, came out the way it was supposed to, and got that reapplied, put the CPU back in. You know, it didn't take long, booted it up, everything booted just fine, and temperatures were looking a lot better. Didn't necessarily give still all the improvements I want, and there may still be more things I can do, but then it came with another dumb mistake I made. So I was talking with my buddy Zach and asking him about some ways that I could improve things with the CPU, because it just seemed like it was using very much for some of the games. And one of the things he mentioned was overclocking. And to be clear, none of what he said was wrong. It's just the way I approached it was the wrong way. And so I tried doing some overclocking through the BIOS. And then my computer was not booting right after that. And I'm pretty sure I know what I did wrong there, and how to do it correctly. However, so because of the fact that I couldn't get my computer to boot up, like it was just, I had one of the fans running really high, nothing was showing up on screen at all. I couldn't get anything whatsoever. Had the little, I had the RAM light on. So I thought maybe I just somehow knocked the RAM sticks loose or something, and needed to go back and fix that. Tried reseating them multiple times, didn't do anything. And then finally, Zach told me, when I told him about my issue, that the thing that I needed to probably do was just flash the BIOS. And so I thankfully I happened to have my secondary computer in my room, so that I could get the BIOS downloaded, the for my motherboard, the latest version. So then I'm booting up. The instruction manual for my motherboard says boot it up, or turn on the computer, and then put the flash drive in, and then it will install the BIOS, and then it will go from there. Nothing was happening though when I did this, or at least it seemed like nothing was happening, because nothing was showing up on screen. I was just like, freaking out and like panicking, like, did I just completely screw up my brand new parts? And then after I let it sit for a little bit, eventually everything did come up on screen, and then it was basically fine from there. I did have one other issue. Once again, I think this was while I was trying to fix the issues with the CPU light being on and not booting. And basically it was giving me an error about my CPU fans not being on. And it's like, I knew that one of those fans was definitely on, but it wasn't detecting it properly. So I unplugged it, made sure all the cables were snug and secure. Because basically, like, it has this huge heat sink that the fans are attached to, that they're clipped onto. And I think that it may have been that the cable was caught between the heat sink and the clamp, and that maybe that was part of the problem, but it may have just been something else. It may have just gotten slightly jostled loose when I was messing with the RAM sticks. I'm not sure. Either way, I fixed the cables, unplugged the cable, plugged it back in, and then after that it booted up just fine, and I haven't had any problems since. God willing, that's it. I guess the last thing I will mention about my past few days, apart from doing music on Sunday this past week, or yesterday, yes, it was yesterday, is that I spent a lot of the time on Saturday just getting stuff prepped for Extra Life. So I have I think I have everything basically ready to go. All of my scenes are prepared in OBS. This time I was able to actually get it all so that I have OBS on both sides, which should make things a lot better because Streamlabs is just so resource hungry. I've been using OBS on this computer, but when I did the Stack Up stream last year, I was using Streamlabs on the other computer because I just didn't have time to set everything up. So now I have it OBS on both sides, and I will mention something with that. So the thing that I had used before was just like I don't know exactly how to explain the stream setup with it, but basically it was streaming from this computer to that computer so that it could output to YouTube. But while it worked perfectly in October, it was not working anymore. I messed with it and messed with it and messed with it, spent probably a couple hours trying to figure it out. Ultimately, I ended up just going with a different solution that's using something called, it's a plugin called Teleport, which basically does the same thing. And it was pretty easy to set up once I did that, and seems to be a good option. I need to actually do test streams. I'm hoping to get something in tomorrow if I have time. It's going to depend on how long it takes me to get through the editing for the podcast. It's possible that what I may end up doing is I may split up the editing and do part of it tomorrow in the early evening, and then do a test stream in the evening, and then do the rest of the editing the following early evening, and that way I can do test streams. Because I want to do them at least twice, if not 3 times, just to make sure everything's functional, everything's going through properly, and yeah. So I think that's everything. It's a lot, but it's just because of the joys and the struggles sometimes with building a PC when you're dealing with various complications. But it's like, yeah, I can definitely understand why console guys would not want to deal with that. But I will say this is the only time I built a PC and had that much trouble. The last couple times I did it, I didn't have anywhere near this many issues. The biggest issue I had was not having thermal paste the one time. And thankfully I was able to just drive down the road, a couple miles away, pick up some thermal paste, and then I was good to go. But yeah.
Yeah. Very, very nice. You went through a whole lot of hassle and a lot of headaches for multiple different things, but I'm glad that everything seemed to come together, at least for the most part, at the end. And so all that's behind you, and you can sort of now just get ready for the live stream on Friday.
Yeah, and of course that's assuming I'm not getting sick, which I'm not sure if I am. I might be. If I'm getting sick, I will by Thursday I will know if I'm, well, I should say tomorrow I should know whether or not I'm actually getting sick. And then by Thursday I'll know whether or not I'll be better enough to do the stream on Friday. If I decide by Thursday I'm just feeling miserable, I will probably end up rescheduling, in which case I would probably do it like April 25th, because it'll be easier for me to push it back by a whole month, because like the next few weeks I'm going to be very busy. I have stuff planned every weekend, so. So yeah, I'm kind of in between, like on the one hand I want to do the stream this weekend because I've been looking forward to it. And planning all around it and getting everything prepped, but at the same time, if I had to skip it, it wouldn't be a huge loss, especially since I have to lead music on Sunday, and because of the fact that everyone else is going to be gone. So it's just kind of like a catch-22. I'd really rather just do the stream this week, but if it doesn't work out, if I'm just really sick, then I'll push it back, and it's not a big deal. Extra Life can be done any time of the year, and technically game day isn't until November. I just usually do it early because that way I can do Stack Up as well. So
Very good. Oh, one more question.
Hmm.
So have you decided how you're going to build, I guess, the or if you were going to decide to build like a smaller PC or anything like that with the parts you have, or
No, I haven't figured any of that out. I honestly, it's just been a matter of I've been so focused on, first of all, getting the computer functioning properly. And then once I
Hmm.
actually got it functioning properly, it's been, the other stuff I've had to do. Because, I mean, remember, after all, I built the PC yesterday, basically, because that was when I had all the parts I needed. And then, of course, I had a couple of issues with that. And so then I had to do more stuff this morning, and then more stuff this afternoon, and then more stuff this evening before I could really get to that. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would say there's a decent possibility that I will try to see if I can just get like a small case or something, or something small enough that I can just put the stuff that's currently in my secondary PC into a new build. Just something small that I can travel with, but I honestly don't know. I may, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing yet. I'm still trying to figure it out. It hasn't been on my mind. It hasn't been a priority by any stretch, and it probably won't be a priority until sometime after Extra Life. So,
Understandable.
but yeah. All right. Well, with all of my long-winded stuff out of the way, what have you been playing this past week, or these
All right.
past several days, I guess?
Yeah, so it's really not that much. Now, I'll just knock this out of the way. I played a little bit of Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep, and I don't have any footage, but I primarily was just trying to go back and stomach the racing mini games, and I got through most of them, but the last one is just really annoying because you actually have to be nearly perfect in getting all the shortcuts down in order to win. And even when I was ahead by a large margin, the NPC, and actually when you do it in the arena, you can actually cut down the number of players to just two between you and one
Yeah.
computer player, which is the best thing to do to make it easier on yourself. But even when I had a large lead ahead, they somehow managed to snap back to being right behind me and just passed me in the final lap. And I was just so frustrated with that I just I had to stop at that point. Um, and yeah, so I don't know when I'll get back to doing that. But mainly I've been playing some more Wall World, and I actually managed to beat the main game, uh, which once you actually find enough blueprints to level up parts of your ship, or at least your robot spider, it makes things a whole lot easier because you're more efficient when you're mining stuff, when you're collecting items, and also you just have better defenses in general for when you get attacked, and also shortening the window period between when you get attacked. That it just makes things a whole lot easier and smoother. So after spending a few more, I guess a few more runs, eventually I was able to actually get to the final part of the game where you collect. Well, also one thing I should say is there are 5 keys you're supposed to collect, and fortunately you get to keep them in between runs, so it's not like you have to collect all 5 of them at once and then get to the exit. So I slowly found the keys and accumulated them before I could actually reach the end, and then I said, you know what? Let me just go and see if what happens when I leave. And so as I was leaving, then I actually had probably about 2 minutes left before I got a perma kill, or at least an insta kill for the run. So I just made it there, and then I realized, oh, I actually win. And then I went back and collected the last few blueprints for the main game, because those will actually let you get the final upgrades that are needed for that part of the game. And then I decided maybe I'll start playing the DLC. And it's interesting because, or at least it's harder because you only have one direction to go, which is up. Whereas when you're playing the main game, you can go up or down, and as a result, you really have to go into each mine you come across, because you can't go the other way to find more items and more deposits and get more upgrades for that run, because there's nowhere else to go. So the one problem with that is the fact that there is, or at least so far, there's a boss that stops you once you reach the end of the first biome you're at, and he essentially has the same type of robot spider that you have, but it's more combat focused. So you essentially have to also make sure you're lucky enough to find upgrades for your weapons and find better weapons during that run. Otherwise, just get stuck with a basic turret, which is fine against smaller enemies, but when you come across the larger ones, it's just not that effective at all. So after you beat him, unfortunately, while you thought you beat the main, I guess you could say, antagonist of the base game, it actually comes back again in the DLC. And the problem is, you don't have enough time, or at least going after the boss pretty much wipes out nearly all of your energy, and so you don't have enough time to go into a new mine to get more resources to replenish your energy. So you're pretty much stuck between a rock and a hard place unless you can somehow manage to defeat the first boss you come across and then try to get enough resources to go back and get everything you need, because you operate between 20-minute time frames between the next encounter, essentially, whenever the boss, the previous boss was going to come and attack you. So by the time you go up to the first enter the new biome, you only have about 2 minutes left, and that's not enough time to go into a new mine, get enough resources. So I'm trying to see if there's a way that I can, or if there's a way to at least be more efficient with the items I get, because it's really just difficult to manage everything. I will say that a lot of the stuff that you do find from the previous game carries over into the new game, so all the different upgrades you have, which is great. And then there are a couple of new DLC upgrades that you can get as well, such as having a scanner that tells you if there are weapons or any types of upgrades for that run that you can find, and that makes it easier to know, is it worth staying in this mine for right now, or should I just like move on to the next one? So that's been a great help. So that way, whenever I know that I found everything that's important, I can just leave and keep moving. So I'm gonna keep trying at it, but I'll definitely see how that goes. But yeah, that's everything that I've been playing so far.
Yeah, cool stuff. Looks pretty good. All right, so in terms of what I've been playing, I definitely have a longer list than you. Most of them were more small bits, but I will say, first of all, I did test Monster Hunter Wilds after I upgraded my CPU, and unfortunately, it still runs terribly. The footage I have here is when I had settings higher, and so I was, really not getting a good frame rate, but basically it was, the game is completely playable at the lower frame rates, and if I was playing on console, I would probably be perfectly fine with this. It's just that, like, mentally I'm not fine with the fact that it runs that it runs sub 60 at all. I just don't think it should. It shouldn't run that poorly. But I will say, especially upgrading to 1440p, the game does look better than it did. It still isn't the best looking game, but it looks considerably better than it looked before. I did end up messing a little bit with the settings this morning after I got the thermal paste reapplied, and then so I was able to actually get the frame rate up to where it was more in the 50 to 70 range, which is pretty good. I mean, it's a lot better from that standpoint, and it doesn't look terrible. I mean, the footage here was recorded before I applied the thermal paste, or applied the additional thermal paste. So this is not running that well. But yeah, it's I will probably mess with it a bit during Extra Life just to see if I can get more of a consistency with that. But the one thing that's weird about it is it doesn't seem like it's really using much of my CPU. It's definitely not using my GPU much at all. And so I don't really know how to solve that. There's some potential things that I can do to fix it, or to improve my CPU usage so that it's actually using more of what I have. But as of right now, I'm not really sure what exactly that's going to be to make that happen. So we'll just kind of see. I mean, it's still not a game I've prioritized at all in terms of being able to play it, or wanting to play it. It's just not a high priority for me, since I only really started playing it because I didn't have to pay for it. So yeah. But something I did end up playing also to test out with this new CPU was some Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. And this, once again, was not very much. I mean, I basically just played a little bit just to test it out. Played like maybe 15 minutes or so, give or take. And some of the performance, I couldn't say for sure how much of the performance difference is like, well, all right, sorry, let me back up. It didn't seem like there was a drastic performance difference. However, I'm running the game also at 150% resolution of what I was running for the game originally, because I'm running it at 1440p instead of 1080p. The game looks a lot better. I'm still getting typically an average of like 74 to 98 frames per second is pretty typical. It looks definitely, it just looks really good compared to how it looked otherwise. I did find, at least now with my current CPU setup, if I have the dynamic resolution, which is a default thing for this game, if I have it set to with the minimum at 66% for the default, or for the dynamic resolution, then it maintains 120 frames per second the entire time. However, I decided that it was blurry enough at that point to where I was like, no, I'd rather just have it in the 80-90 range and to get the better visuals, because it really does look very good. And you'll see in the footage here that it just looks much better. I'm very pleased with that. So, but yeah, that's really all I did, mostly just because I didn't really have time to play more than that, and I just wanted to test it a little bit. But then I also got this game from this random guy named Justin. He got me a copy of Metaphor ReFantazio. So I didn't play a lot of it. I probably played like maybe an hour, give or take, but I've been playing it only on the Steam Deck. So I first booted it up on my desktop because that way I could transfer over my progress from the demo, which is basically just the beginning of the game, like the first 6 hours of the game. And then after I did that, I got my save uploaded to the cloud, and then from there I started playing it on the Steam Deck. And the footage that's recorded here is from the Steam Deck. So it's basically low settings. I think at this point I probably had anti-aliasing turned on, but I ultimately have turned it off just because it helps to get more of a consistent 60 frames per second. It's not perfect on 60. Definitely, like in the dungeon, it's hovering more between 40 and 60. a lot. Well, yeah. I mean, like on the low end, it goes down to 40. But it can, but it frequently is in like the 50s and up to 60. So, um, I mean, I think it's still looks pretty good on the larger screen. It doesn't look as good, this footage, but on the small screen, it looks great. So, it really doesn't make a huge difference, and I'm pretty happy with the frame rate that I'm getting for the most part. I mean, it would be great if it could just get a locked 60 like Persona 3 Reload gets or Persona 5 Royal, but this game is definitely more visually complicated than those games. So, but yeah, I didn't, like I said, I didn't play a ton because I'm not really sure that I want to dive into this game a whole lot at the moment because of the fact that I'm in the middle of multiple other games. Um, but it's still been pretty fun to play a little bit, and of course playing it on the Steam Deck is just, it's glorious. So I really like that. So thank you again for that. I look forward to doing the comparison for it whenever it comes to Switch 2. I'll pick it up there, and then I can do the comparison between those two devices, and that'll be an interesting one because I doubt the Switch 2 is going to do 60. Most likely it's going to be 30 unless they optimize it to make it actually run at 60, which they could if they wanted to. This one, I don't think they really took the time to optimize it specifically for Steam Deck. But yeah, it's good stuff. The battle theme is still amazing and just gets stuck in my head. And yeah, so good. But the bulk of what I played, and even then wasn't a ton of time played because of everything else I had, was of course Dark Souls 2. So I went back to try again against the Belfry Gargoyles because of the fact that I'd gotten really close on them several times, and the footage here is just like nearing the end of one of my attempts. And man, I literally got it down to where there was just one left. Actually, no, I guess there was two of them left. They both had like a sliver of health each. No, maybe it was one. Yeah, it was one. There was one left with just basically a sliver of health left. And then he killed me. But I didn't have any healing items, so there was nothing I could do about it. But even though I forgot to actually record the full fight, I didn't remember to record until like the very, very end. I did actually end up beating them. So I just have it kind of separated, there, and there's victory achieved, absorbing those souls and standing there with my sword and my armor on. I had tried a few different things on this fight. I tried switching over to like the big club and going two-handed on stuff, and ultimately I ended up settling on two-handed with the great sword, and I realized that basically I could do the equivalent of the R2 attack by pressing R1 when I'm two-handed. This is one fight where like having a shield wasn't really helpful because when you have like, it's either 4 or 6 of those gargoyles that come after you, it doesn't really help. You just basically have to do your best to avoid them and try to take them out one at a time, or hit more than one whenever you're able to. But it wasn't particularly easy, so I didn't have to do any summons though because I couldn't do any summons. I didn't have any humanity, so I couldn't summon anyone. So I just I cleared it without. But then I went looking. Well, so regarding this fight with the Rotten, now I talked about it last week and I had some issues with it. Turns out there's a second bonfire in there. However, it was not one that I could get to because it was blocked off by someone who was petrified, and I didn't have any more of, I can't remember what they're called, but it's some kind of branch that you need in order to unpetrify somebody. And so I had been looking up, okay, where are all the locations where you can get these, because I knew that I had used a bunch of them on things and had been able to get some more in one area. I can't even remember the name of the area, but this area that I had previously been to, there's a boss that I completely missed was there. Like, it just kind of like tucked behind some stuff. The Scorpioness, I think it's Najka. I'll know once her name pops up on screen. But Yeah, so I went back to that area because I knew that beating her, I would be able to get um, this other branch that I needed in order to be able to depetrify the person who was blocking the way to that second bonfire in the Rotten. And um, yeah, so I fought her and I beat her. And um, once I realized that there was that second bonfire at the Rotten, it was like, oh, that's the reason why Zach was telling me that this fight is not that hard. And it's because of the fact that the bonfire is like right next to the boss room, whereas the bonfire I was running from was like way in the back where I had to go past a bunch of poison stuff and everything. Those statues that shoot poison at you constantly. And so I just been struggling with that. But once I was finally able to get into that fight, um, I was able to get through it. And once again, it was with no summons because I still didn't have any humanity. So I just had to attempt it. I think probably after I opened up that bonfire, it only took me 1 or 2 tries to actually beat him. I did find out that it's possible to cut off his arms, which basically makes it so that, I mean, if you can cut off both, then he can't hit you at all. I only managed to cut off one, but it still helped a lot because then he couldn't grab me. Because that was like half the time when I died to him, it was because I just was a little too close and he grabbed me, and then he has this attack. He grabs you and then he holds you over his head and like twists and just instant kills you. So yeah, but I mean, I was definitely like over leveled for this fight. I was doing a lot of damage. I was doing like 500 some odd damage per hit. Um, but the problem, of course, is just that he also hits very hard. So it wasn't until I cut off his second arm that I was able to have an easier time getting through the rest of the fight. And ultimately, I ended up beating him, and he's one of the second great souls that you get. Or rather, he is the second great soul you get. And I can't remember if there's 3 or 4 of them that you need total. It might be more than that. I don't know. There's a lot of bosses in this game. So, but yeah, that's all I've done so far. I can't remember if I went anywhere in the game after I finished that fight other than just to, cash in my souls for leveling up. I don't think I did anything else in the game because the last time I played it was Friday. Yeah, it was Friday because Saturday was super busy and then Sunday was busy and today was busy because of work. And of course, because of the fact that I got Metaphor, that was the thing I was playing on my Steam Deck. With the little bit of gaming time that I had in between stuff. So, yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I didn't get a chance to play any games with the kids this week because there just wasn't time. It was too busy. But I'll be playing stuff with them during Extra Life, so that'll be fun.
Sounds good. It's a shame that you didn't get any sort of meaningful performance gain with Monster Hunter Wilds, and I mean, it's probably just a case where the game just is not properly optimized for what it is. And I mean, considering the fact that it's funny how you mentioned that even though it's not locked with Metaphor, you could get it running on the Steam Deck, and but you can't get Monster Hunter Wilds running on a desktop,
Right.
at a decent frame rate, which it's just sad. And I mean, I'm hoping that Capcom at some point will come back and actually make some needed changes because it just really should not be performing the way it is. All things being said, yeah, it's just sad. I mean. I mean, maybe. I mean, still, I like you mentioned before that a game like that would be CPU bound, and so as a result, you upgraded your CPU, and I mean, you even overclocked it, and it's still not giving you any
Well,
meaningful.
it's not overclocked anymore because when I reset
Sorry.
it, I took off
Oh,
the
okay.
overclocking stuff.
Okay, but even
But
still.
Yeah. I mean,
It's
the boosts I was getting were before I did any of the overclocking stuff, and that was just modifying settings. It was really applying the thermal paste that made the difference from that standpoint. But at least from what I understand, there may still be things I can do CPU wise to improve things, because it's definitely not utilizing my CPU super well. It's not maxing out, anything. So theoretically, if I can get it to actually use it more, then I might be able to get more of a consistent above 60, and I would probably ultimately be happy with that. I mean, it's not ideal, but at least it would be good enough.
yeah. And it is weird though that it's not fully utilizing either your CPU or GPU. I mean,
Right.
normally it's one or the other, but the fact that it's not doing it for either of those components is just very odd.
Yeah.
So hopefully that gets straightened out. Um, but I am glad though that you got the at least the improved visuals at the very least out of that, and being having that OLED monitor probably helped it make a look a little nicer too. So there is that. And I'm definitely glad that you got the improved visuals for Final Fantasy Rebirth. Yeah, I mean that definitely sounds good. Now question, I don't, or at least I don't, or at least I must have missed that. Were you changing the resolution scaling in the game, or was that like in the
Yeah,
NVIDIA?
it's in the game. It's but I mean, by default, both remake and rebirth have like they already do some dynamic resolution stuff. That's just the way they designed it when they originally put it on. Well, the first one on PS4 and then second one on PS5. But yeah, you can set the dynamic resolution scaling. There's quite a bit of range there. You can do as low as 33% if you want to. The way that I ultimately have it set up is that it doesn't ever do dynamic resolution scaling. It just is at 100% the whole time. So it's always rendering at 100%, which makes it look a lot better all the time. I mean, there are still some spots where it's kind of like, this could look better, but that's just the design of the game versus it being a dynamic resolution thing.
Okay. Then I'll probably check and see if that's available in remake, because I haven't touched anything like that I know of.
It is not available in remake, no.
Ugh, okay.
But remake, from the footage you sent me last week, it looked a lot better.
Oh yeah, it definitely looked better, I would say. And one thing that I feel like maybe I might have been, or at least as far as like the visuals, which I thought was a problem, is I think that the game somehow, or at least in my opinion, it looks a whole lot better during night scenes than day scenes. Like I don't know if it's just me or not, because I did notice that when I was playing and I was still in the slums, I was like, okay, it looks a little better because probably the dynamic resolution probably has more to work with the newer GPU than the older one. But then when I got to the nighttime right outside of the wall market, I thought, this seems substantially better somehow. And I don't know if it's just because it looks better at night. I don't know if that's the reason why. But yeah, it definitely did look better than it was before. So, maybe it's just me on that end, regarding that. But yeah, it still looks good. I'll definitely say that. And then regarding metaphor, so when you jumped back into the game, did you remember exactly where you had left off at with like the demo, or did you like have some time to get like, adjusted?
I remembered because basically it's just like right before a boss fight, or like a mini boss fight, really. Because unfortunately, the way the demo ended was you complete that encounter, and then once you complete that encounter, the demo ends. You don't have the ability to save right after that. So basically just saved right before that encounter, and then when I brought the game up again, then I had to redo that fight, but it wasn't difficult, so.
Okay. Nice. Yeah, I don't think I have any other questions listed then.
All right, sounds good. All right, well, let's get into the news. So, first of all, we got some news last week that Death Stranding 2 has a release date for June 26th. Currently, that is only for the PS5 and obviously PS5 Pro with that. Nothing about PC or Xbox, even though we know it will eventually, at minimum, come to PC. It will probably come to Xbox as well, since the first game is on Xbox now. But yeah, obviously, I have thoughts, especially having watched that trailer finally. What about you? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very, I mean, it's definitely coming up. It's right around the window. I mean, we're halfway through March, so it's not like it's going to be too long for it to arrive. And I mean, I think all in all, Kojima's been pacing the delivery pretty well. I mean, especially when you compare it with other companies that have mentioned games and then years go by, nothing new. And then when you see something next, it's a small teaser and then still no new gameplay, no new trailers or anything like that, no release date. Whereas, Kojima said, hey, here's Death Stranding 2. We've got some teasers here and there. We've got more gameplay footage here and there. Last year we had something new. And this year we've got some more footage and we've got a release date. So I think great job on that end. And I mean, I looked at the trailer. It seemed very. I mean, I never played the first game, but some stuff just when I saw the trailer, I thought, okay, what am I exactly looking at here? I mean, especially with like those giant, I guess, kaiju things, and they putting on the VR headset, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
what? What am I looking at, Kojima? What are you doing here? Exactly. It's just very odd. And then, like a lot of people said, that not Solid Snake character, which definitely, I mean, I definitely see, I definitely see what it's doing there. Although it also, I just have questions about, what's going on and stuff. I mean, sure, if I played the first game, I probably might have some, okay, maybe not a whole lot of context, but I might have at least a little bit of context for stuff. But it definitely looks interesting, and I'm very tempted to go ahead and actually let me see here, because it's the Steam.
It is on sale right now.
It is on sale right now. So
in fact, it's one of the games that I purchased for giveaways for the Extra Life stream. But it's like I think it's Green Man Gaming that has it on sale for like $16, which is a really good price.
Yeah,
for that game.
I might pick that up then. I might.
It's really,
I might get that
that's a
then.
great price. Because like once I saw that, I was like, oh. Because at first I saw Fanatical had it on sale for like $16.32 or something, but they ran out of keys. So then I just looked on Green Man Gaming and it was even cheaper, and it's like, okay, I'll grab it there, and then I can give that one away.
Yeah, I'll definitely pick that up then, and try to get caught up on that in the midst of getting caught up on remake for Rebirth. But yeah, it definitely seems very interesting, I will say, and I'm definitely interested in hearing what you have to say as someone who played the first game and saw it through to the end. So I'll let you go ahead and pick it up from here.
All right. Well, of course, obviously, I'm a little disappointed that it doesn't currently have a PC release date, because I love Death Stranding. I'm still planning on working towards the getting all the remaining achievements. In fact, I will probably play some during Extra Life, especially since I'm going to be giving away a key for that game as well. But yeah, I finally got around to watching the trailer, because initially, I just saw, okay, it's coming PlayStation 5 on June 26th. That's great. I'm happy for PlayStation fans, for those of us, for those who really enjoy the game. I'm obviously not buying a PS5 at all. For that, I'll just wait for the PC version, especially since Death Stranding 1 came 6 months after it went to PS4. So I'm sure 2 will probably be a similar window, especially now that Kojima has full ownership of the IP. So, but anyway, I watched the trailer probably a couple days ago, and it looks great. Like, I was already excited about it because of how much I enjoyed Death Stranding 1, but yeah, 2 looks incredible, and I mean, graphically looks even better than the first one, which, the first one already looked great. It's still using the Decima engine, which I'm really happy about because that means that it should be well optimized on PC, like the first game is. And I mean, I know it's not going to run on the Steam Deck, or if it does, it will be very poorly. It will run poorly unless they specifically make the effort to optimize it, which they could. But Death Stranding 1 was hit or miss on the Steam Deck. It just, like, at times it was good, and then other times it was like, not good enough. I know that you wouldn't be happy with the performance, so I would just say just play it on your desktop. But yeah, the trailer, and I'll have to actually get the trailer and add it here in the video, but there's just a whole lot of stuff to it. As usual, it's a lot of out of context cutscenes and gameplay and things like that. There was definitely some new stuff that I saw in there that was not at all in the first game. That kaiju thing that you mentioned, I think that it was intended. Well, for one, that was just a giant BT, because the first game does have one of those that shows up, and there was definitely a lot more variety to how many BTs are in the game, or at least how many of the big ones. But there's the BT when he puts the ship on top of the BT's neck to basically make it like a head, very reminiscent of Metal Gear Rex. So it's like you got him sneaking in all these references to these things that he created, because as much as Konami wants to try and erase him from Metal Gear Solid, the fact is that it is his creation. And of course, then you have the not Snake guy who basically seems to be taking over the role of one of the characters that was in the first game. Very curious to see how that's going to work out, because obviously it's not the same character. It's someone very different story behind him. And I mean, we got virtually no information in the trailer, which is, to be expected. But everything I saw in that trailer, I'm just like, yes, I'm so ready. So ready. But while I'm disappointed on the one hand that it's not coming to PC on day one, I'm also kind of glad because I already have so many games I'm playing and I keep adding to it. I mean, I took advantage of some of the sales and grabbed a few things that I probably won't get to anytime soon. Like, I grabbed Nier Replicant because that's on sale, for pretty cheap. Nier Automata I'm giving away. And I grabbed, let's see here, what else did I get? Castlevania Dominus Collection, which, I'm still planning to get the physical for Switch whenever that becomes available again, but it takes usually a while for limited run to get those things back in stock, so I think it'll be a while. I can't remember if I grabbed any other ones for me. Actually, I should just check my Steam library real quick and see. Oh, I grabbed RoboCop, and I grabbed the Mass Effect Legendary Edition. That was like $5 or something for that. Because I already had it on EA because I got it free from Amazon some time ago, but I'd rather just have it on Steam. Oh, I grabbed Sekiro. I mean, it wasn't it wasn't any cheaper than it ever is. It was just $30, but
yeah.
But I grabbed it because I know I'm gonna end up playing it. I mean, I'll do the Neo games before I play Sekiro, but I definitely want to play it at some point. Persona 5 Tactica. Mostly for the comparison when I do that. The Metal Gear Solid collection. So, I think that's all the ones I grabbed. Yeah, it looks like that's all the new ones. But then, of course, I grabbed quite a few games that I'm giving away, which I think I listed all of them on my post. There's quite a few in there. There's like, anyway, I'm going way off topic. Okay, so going back to the topic, Death Stranding 2. I'm very excited about it. I know that it will come to PC eventually, probably sooner rather than later, and Xbox will probably be longer, but it's possible it could be as short of a window as it is for PC. I mean, obviously that's just up to Kojima. He has to figure out that part, and hopefully he can get it over there quickly because, I mean, it hasn't been long since it came to Xbox, the first game, so it would be great, people had the chance to play it so much sooner and all that. But yeah, I don't know that I really have any other thoughts on that. Just excited. But I got to finish up the achievements in Death Stranding 1.
And that's what, still 4 achievements left?
No, it's more than that. It's, I want to say it's like 8 or 9. Let's see here. I have 9. Or, well, it's 8, and then I get 1 for getting all achievements. So,
okay.
But mostly it's grindy stuff, so I'll probably play that at least a little bit during Extra Life.
Sounds good.
All right. Any other thoughts on that topic before we move on to the next one?
No, sir.
All right. You want to talk about SteamOS coming to other handhelds?
Sure thing. So before, Valve had mentioned about wanting to bring SteamOS to other handhelds, and that has come to pass. Recently, there was a new update, SteamOS 3.7.0, or at least the preview version, and it was given the code name Pi Day in light of Pi Day this past weekend. And there were some improvements, some updates and stuff for it. But one of the things that was mentioned is the fact that it is now possible to bring it over to other PC handhelds as well. And that's so like your Asus ROG Ally, your Lenovo Legion Go, except for the Legion Go S. That's the only one that does not have support. But
I thought that one already had SteamOS.
Oh, that one already did?
I could have sworn that there was one of the Legions that was shipping with SteamOS.
Okay, yeah,
Maybe
I just see that
wrong.
it might have been it then.
it
I just see right here in the article it says the only non-Valve handheld to support SteamOS is the Legion Go S. So I don't know if what's happening on that end. But yeah, other than that though, every other handheld seems to have support now, which is good. And not only that, but there has been a rumor that Valve also wants to or is going to be launching SteamOS for desktop as well. And just as sort of a linked article within that article, there was a tweet from a guy from a user on X or Twitter by the name of Sadly It's Dadly, and he just put out a tweet that said it's almost here with a picture that just says SteamOS, and it seemed just to allude to SteamOS coming to desktop as its own OS, and it's possibly also essentially just being the same way as regular SteamOS on handheld, but just more so catered to people who want to have a, console-like experience on a desktop. Of course, you can still have stuff. You can still, of course, use desktop mode if you want to, but just sort of out of the box, it defaults to the big picture mode essentially. But yeah, that is essentially the big topic there. Before I go into my thoughts, what are your thoughts regarding the news and the alleged rumor?
All right. Well, first of all, I do want to note what the article says here is, as I thought, that the only non-Valve handheld to currently support SteamOS is the Lenovo Legion Go S. So the idea of it coming to more places is okay. So basically, my understanding from what it says here is that, of course, SteamOS 3.7 is out, and or at least in the beta version. I haven't checked it. Mine probably just needs updated. Because I'm on the beta channel. But basically, it is they're working on making it compatible with more devices, because currently the Lenovo Legion Go S is the only one that actually is a non-Valve handheld that already has SteamOS. So, yeah, I mean, I like the idea, of course, of it coming to more places, because I think SteamOS is fantastic, and it is a good way to help broaden the adoption of Linux as a platform. Like, I wish I could commit to Linux, but my problem still remains that there's just enough issues with compatibility to where it ends up being more of a problem for me. Like, one of the things, at least until I can find a suitable Linux replacement that's one of the bigger ones, is Adobe Premiere. Now, I'd like to find a different software that doesn't require the Adobe license. I mean, I don't pay for it. It's my brother-in-law has the license, and it can be on up to 2 computers. And since I take care of like getting stuff rendered for uploading the sermons to the church's YouTube channel and that sort of thing, he's perfectly fine with me using it. And plus, otherwise, it's only being used on his computer. So, but yeah, until Linux has support for stuff like that, or rather that software supports Linux, is really what it comes down to, I'm a little more hesitant. And it's also just, it feels kind of daunting to make such a dramatic shift, as much as I dislike things about Windows. But yeah, maybe eventually. Either way, I think it's good that it's going to be an option for handhelds, and not have to deal with Windows on a handheld, despite the fact that you obviously get more compatibility. So, but yeah, I think that's really all I have to say on that front.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's definitely good that other people can, make use of the software, because there are people who wanted to use an Ally because it's actually more powerful than a Steam Deck, but they didn't necessarily want to use the Windows as the OS on there, and so they either had to, just deal with it, or they had to try using a SteamOS alternative like Bazite or Chimera OS or something along those lines. So, actually having the official SteamOS available is great, just because there's more support and it's probably more optimized to work with those handhelds. I mean, granted, I think Chimera OS is optimized for certain handhelds, but again, you would need to have that specific handheld in order to get to function properly. And so I think definitely it's great on that end. And I mean, I initially was a bit uncertain how they would get to handle, because I know that at least with Windows, it's, if you're using AMD, then you're pretty much okay, because AMD's primarily open source with their drivers and stuff like that, so it's easier to work around with that. So I wasn't certain how it was with Intel, but if they're getting it to run on the Intel-based handhelds, then obviously there's no problem on that end. So that's great to know. If they do something for desktop, my concern is for people who might want to use SteamOS, but I don't know how SteamOS is going to handle stuff with NVIDIA, because at least up until last year, their drivers have been completely proprietary, and there's been no open source alternative or for their drivers at all or support like that. So that's sort of been a challenge for people who want to use NVIDIA in Linux. Now, don't get me wrong, it's definitely gotten better, and with NVIDIA making a move toward open sourcing their drivers and getting support there, that's been great. I mean, they haven't open sourced everything, but at least for the basic stuff, there's been huge improvements on that end. So that's good, but I mean, still, if you're going to try to do something more advanced with NVIDIA's GPUs, then you're going to have a harder time to get what you want out of that. But I feel like still, if you're at least using AMD or if you're using Intel, I mean, granted, I don't know how Intel's GPUs work underneath Linux. I haven't, tested them or seen anyone who uses one. But hopefully it's not that big of a deal, especially considering the fact that the handhelds are using Intel graphics, so obviously something's working, at least on that end. But we'll see. But at least on the handhelds, I'm glad that people are able to properly utilize SteamOS on that end, so that way they can have a choice, similar to how if you wanted to use Windows on a Steam Deck, you have that choice. So yeah, definitely good stuff there.
Well, I thought the only handhelds that were actually using Intel for graphics was just the MSI ones.
Oh yeah, that's true.
The rest of them are all using AMD.
Yeah,
well,
although
the Switch that's using NVIDIA, but
although
I could be wrong on that.
No, you're definitely
sure.
right. Although I wonder, I mean, the article didn't mention it, but I am curious though, because GPD usually has been using Intel for most of their handhelds. So if you could get SteamOS running on there, then that would be pretty cool. Although it would be funny though, considering the fact that GPD was saying that SteamOS was a closed source operating system, despite the fact that they're using Windows, and they were saying that, using SteamOS is promoting piracy essentially. But so if someone was able to get SteamOS running on GPD, I would just find, I just find that funny on that end because of how poetic it is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like running a PlayStation game on an Xbox. It's or vice versa. Well, I guess maybe less vice versa. But anyway, yeah. Cool. All right, good stuff. Okay, so the next topic we have is CoPilot for gaming is coming to Xbox Play Anywhere. And the short version, from my understanding, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on the matter, is that basically it's using CoPilot, which is something that's already in Microsoft, and in such a way that it can essentially help people have to avoid having to spend time searching online, like if they're having trouble with figuring out what to do, or if they're having trouble figuring out how to beat a boss and things like that. And you can basically say, hey, CoPilot, and then CoPilot will, give you tips or whatever, answer your questions to help you, just like a Google Assistant or Siri or what have you would do similarly. Basically just, it's intended, as they put it, it's intended to be a way to help people be able to spend more time gaming and less time searching online for the information that they need. So, I didn't get a chance to really look at the actual prototype stuff, but at least from like screenshots and the basic descriptions that I saw, it seems like that's essentially how it works. Yeah, that's basically what my understanding is of it. So, what are your thoughts? And obviously, correct me if I got something wrong.
Yeah, that's exactly how I interpreted when I was reading the article as well. So I don't have anything different on that end. I think I'm a bit mixed in regards to this, just because I mean, I feel like if you're already looking stuff online to figure out something, maybe with the rare occasional thing, you're going to be able to find something relatively well, unless you're trying to do something like say, hey, I'm trying to find all the items in this area. I need to know where exactly they are and also know if I've missed something. I feel like in
Right.
general, you should be able to find information pretty quickly within, the first 3 or 4 results in search results. So I just feel like this is in a sense engineering solutions to problems that already have answers for something. I
Yeah.
mean, sure, you could say it's easier to say, hey, CoPilot, whatever your problem is, and then it'll give you a result. But I mean, I feel like it's not that hard to, if you're at your computer, tab shift, type in what you're looking for, and find the answer. Or if you're playing on your console, pull out your phone, type it in, find an answer. I mean, I don't think it's that. I don't think it's that complicated. I mean, I feel like it's sort of like the argument of saying, oh, I mean, I'm not saying that, if you prefer doing this, then there's no problem with that. But I feel like it's the same type of people who say, you know, why go up to my console and change discs when I can just, use digital library and just like go ahead
Right.
and pull it up there? I'm like, sure, you can do that, but there's nothing wrong with just taking the disc out and putting it in and swapping it out. Like, you make it sound like it's a huge ordeal. So like, I feel like in a sense, that's kind of the same thing here where, okay, it's not a monumental thing, so why do we really even need it to exist? I mean, sure, it streamlines things to a degree, but is it really necessary? And then also, I kind of feel like, sort of like going back to other things we've discussed, where, okay, is this just another case of having AI in a place where we don't necessarily need AI? Because I mean, Copilot is part of Microsoft's AI suite, so
Right.
this is just another thing where they're inserting their own AI into something that probably doesn't need AI, just for the sake of having AI because it's trendy nowadays. So I mean, on one hand, I can understand that it's quicker to use and easier to use, but on the other hand, I'm just like, what's wrong with just typing up something in a search engine and getting the results? I mean, like I said, unless you're looking for something very specific and very obscure, you're going to have to, i- unless, like I said, unless it's specific, it shouldn't be hard to find what you're looking for within the first 3 or 4 answers. Like, say, for example, you want to figure out how to beat a boss in Dark Souls. Type in the boss name, boom, first 2 results. Automatically, it should be leading you to information about the boss, and you just click on the link, look through there. You see the tactics and whatnot, and see all the strategies, and boom, there you go. Or, YouTube video result that should pop up within like the first 3 or 4 entries. I mean, sometimes YouTube's algorithm is very messed up, but for the most part, it should give you what you want. So I don't think this is necessarily something that's needed. And I mean, even still, I feel like there are probably still gonna be cases where if a game is not as popular as, if it's not something that's really uh well known, if it's a very niche game, you might not even be able to find results within Copilot, and they might say no results found, and then you still would have to go and search for it on a search engine and get results that
Yeah.
way. So I don't know. I'm on mixed to negative regarding this.
Yeah. I'm kind of all over the place with this. So I will say, first of all, in general, I'm just not really a fan of AI. I just, I feel like most of the time, at least in my experience trying to use AI for various things, I end up spending more time trying to get the answer that I'm looking for, or an answer that's actually usable, than I would have spent just doing the work otherwise. Like there was this thing for work when we had our IT summit last year. The head of the whole department basically said he wanted all of us to do two truths and a lie about ourselves, but use AI to craft the lie. But the problem is that I could come up with a lie and craft it myself a whole lot faster than it was trying to get the AI to get something that was actually like sounded like me in any way, shape, or form. Because otherwise, it was just like, this doesn't sound anything like me. It doesn't sound like something I would say. And to me, it just felt like this is such a waste of time. I'm wasting so much time just because they want to use AI, more and more for efficiency. It's like, this isn't efficient. This is completely inefficient. And I know AI has gotten better, and I'm not saying that all AI is terrible, but to me, as much as there are times where I could see CoPilot being useful, in general, I just would rather not even bother with it. I'd rather just stick to traditional methods. And granted, I'm pretty old school too, because for a long time I held on to, I would rather have a physical strategy guide than search online for something. Nowadays, that's not really an option because physical strategy guides hardly ever get printed. So from that standpoint, it's like, okay, but I still I like having that thing in my hand, I like being able to do that. And then also sometimes I just can't think of exactly how to explain what I'm looking for. And so the thing I like about having a strategy guide is typically it's just going to have everything in order, and or I can search for a specific thing and it's easy to find, and I don't have to worry about, do I have an internet connection and so on and so forth. Yeah, I have to carry around a book, which is not always the most convenient thing, but still there's something I like about it. I can't explain it. But when it comes to this having CoPilot in game to save a little bit of time, I mean, I get it. I get the point of it. But realistically, I'd rather just do a quick search. I mean, I don't use Google, I should say, I don't use Chrome, and I don't typically search through Google. I mean, obviously, I use YouTube and Gmail, that sort of thing. So it's not as though Google doesn't have my information, but I'll do my search. I use the Brave browser and I'll search through that. And typically, if I search on there, I will get an AI summary of essentially what all the different pages are saying. And if that doesn't give me the information I need, then I can check the search results. But most of the time, it gives me enough information to where it's like, okay, this basically told me what I needed to know, and then I can go on my merry way if it comes to that. But that's, even still, it's more often than not, I'll just end up going to a page, whether it's watching a Dark Souls boss or seeing where I can find this specific item that I need in Dark Souls, or whatever, insert game. I don't think that this is bad. It's just not something that I could see myself ever making use of. I prefer not to talk to AI assistants for the most part. I'll do the search in Brave, and I'll utilize the AI that gives a summary because that can be helpful. But it's not something where I'm actively seeking out the AI. It's just more oh, that's convenient. It's already there. Sometimes I can get the information I need from that. But I don't know. I also never liked the idea of basically giving permission for them to listen to your conversations, listen to what you're saying all the time. Because that's yeah. I mean, yes, we live in a surveillance state basically anyway, but Like, I don't really want to intentionally add to that. I don't want to make it any easier for them than I have to. So that's pretty much all I have to say.
You mentioning that, it reminds me of how there was backlash with the Xbox One, I think, because of the Kinect always needing to be on.
Right.
And now it's just like, yeah, now we've got Kinect back again, and everyone's fine with that essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, of course, Kinect probably wouldn't have been able to see you because do you remember hearing about back in the day Kinect couldn't see black people? I mean, I have a feeling it was probably more like a specific situation, like someone who's a bit on the darker side and was in a dark room maybe, and that's why it had a hard time distinguishing, but it was still like, wow, that's bad.
All right, well, oh man, I guess I should be fine then.
Yeah. All right, any more thoughts on that topic?
No sir.
All right, well, let's get into listener questions and any additional discussion topics you might have. But first, we did get a listener question once again from Beer Money Vic. His question was, do you partake in those quick customer satisfaction surveys when you call customer support lines? I always do since I'm over 40.
Well, okay, so I generally do not participate in those surveys. Only time I probably have is if I order something and then I get an email back saying like, hey, tell us how we did. And even then, it's probably only about 3 times out of 10 at best that I actually respond to them. And part of it is just because of the fact that I just don't feel like it. Sometimes I just don't feel like opening up emails in general unless it's something that I'm expecting or something that is just important enough for me to open. Like there are a lot of I receive a lot of email where some stuff it's like, yeah, I'm interested in reading this. I want to see what's in here, but other times I'm just like, I just don't feel like looking at this right now. So it just slowly gets pushed down in the pile, and part of that is also just the surveys where it's just like, yeah, I probably would like to tell you my experience, but I just don't feel like doing it right now. So that's essentially my answer.
Yeah, I think for me, it's basically like if I have a really positive experience or a really negative experience, I'm happy to take the survey and answer accordingly. But if I have kind of a neutral experience, like there have been plenty of situations where usually it's through something like Amazon support or whatever, and they can't solve my problem, but the fact that they're unable to solve my problem isn't because of anything that they're doing wrong or that there's necessarily any way they could. It's just basically like it's completely out of their control. Like they just have no ability to solve my problem. And so I feel bad. Like I don't want to give them a negative review, but I also don't really want to give them a positive review because it's like, it's not this person's fault that they couldn't help me in this particular situation. But I also don't want it to be like, oh, they did a great job because they also couldn't solve my problem. And yes, I guess there is, of course, there's a neutral, you can do something right in the middle. But I think it's mostly just because I don't want it to ever seem like the reason I'm doing neutral is because of anything wrong with the person themselves. It's just because because the result wasn't satisfactory, but it's not their fault. So, yeah. So it's probably like 50-50 on whether or not I will respond to one of those. But I would say more often than not, if I have either a really positive or a really negative experience, those are the times when I'm more likely to stick around for the survey. Or, take the survey through email. Or if, I guess, well, since this is specifically about customer satisfaction surveys, it doesn't really matter, but yeah.
Now, I just thought about this when you mentioned Amazon, and this might not necessarily be the same type of thing, but I just thought I'd mention this is the one time, or at least one thing I know I generally always do is if I buy something off of eBay, I generally always leave a review,
Yeah.
just because I know it helps the sellers. Now,
Right.
only time when I probably won't is if I have a sort of negative, or not necessarily negative, but it just wasn't satisfactory. Like, for example, one time I bought a Metroid statue from on eBay, and it said it was new, and sure, it was sealed when I bought it, but the thing was, the Metroid, or at least the Metroid figure that was supposed to come with it, wasn't in there. And I was just like, well, I don't feel like going through the hassle of, contact the person since it was shipped from Japan, and I don't really I really don't feel like discussing all this and like figuring out like, okay, like what happened, did I do anything or that ends, because it was just like a small thing. So I was like, I just won't leave a review here. That's like one time where I just won't do it, but generally other than that though, I do leave reviews for like everyone, and most of the time it's normally always positive too, because either I get something pretty early that came sooner than expected, or on occasion the sellers might even just be in constant communication, which I think is a plus, when they are just saying like, hey, thanks for buying so and so from me, here's the shipping, even though shipping number will be provided when when it gets shipped out and I get a notification from eBay. But I appreciate the fact that they go and provide it for me directly, going that extra yard. So I definitely want to leave positive reviews in those cases.
Indeed. All right, do you have any other discussion topics for us?
Yes, and this was originally one question, but then as I was thinking about it, it sort of branched off into a sub question. So
Okay.
the first question is, what media would you like to see have a video game adaptation? Considering the fact that there's a lot of stuff that is getting, or rather, actually no, it's basically the fact that we're getting a lot of video games getting film or TV adaptation. So what would you like to have? So what type of media would you like to have adapted into a video game? And then sort of branch off of that, is there a video game you would not want to have any type of adaptation at all?
Okay, so making sure I understood the questions correctly. The first question is, what media would you like to have adapted into a video game?
Yes, sort of like sort of like how movies like Die Hard got video games, or like
Gotcha. Okay.
stuff like that, or even like
Okay.
books or whatever.
Right. What would I want adapted into a video game? Ready Player One would be a cool one. It started as a book, then they made a movie that was loosely based on the book, but was written by the author of the book. He just adapted it to movie, and I loved the movie. The movie was great. Yeah, I would like to see a game of that. I think that would be pretty cool.
What type of genre would you want that to be, by the way?
I guess probably like an RPG, something along those lines. Because I mean, that's kind of what it is in some ways. I don't know. I mean, it's weird because of course it's like it crosses a bunch of different genres too. But yeah, I think probably something along those lines. I mean, of course, Metroidvania would always be amazing, but I don't know how that would work as a Metroidvania. So yeah. And then the other question was, remind me what the second question was.
Is there a video game you would not want to ever have an adaptation
okay.
of? Because I guess either you just feel like it shouldn't have one, or you do not trust that the adaptation would be good, whether just because of production or the fact that they were not faithful to the original source material.
Well, I'm gonna say probably Chrono Trigger. Well, I thought about saying Death Stranding, but Death Stranding really, if you cut out um, all of the actual gameplay aspects of it, it's basically a movie already. I mean, Kojima was going for the movie thing, and story-wise, like they could very easily make it into a movie. They just cut out most of the extra stuff. But yeah, so yeah, I would say probably Chrono Trigger, just because of the fact that Chrono Trigger, I feel like, well, honestly, my biggest thing is I don't want them to ever have Chrono talk, because he's supposed to be mute. And it's funny, I remember when I was in my teens, like after I had first played Chrono Trigger, and this is back in the days when fan fictions were a popular thing, at least. I mean, I'm sure to some degree they still are, but in the late 90s, early 2000s, when I remember doing this, I remember, writing fan fiction for Chrono Trigger, and basically I made it so that, he never said anything, but everyone always understood exactly what he was saying. Kind of like I am Groot, except that he doesn't even say I am Groot. And, like Marl was attributing like various things to him, and it was just funny. But yeah, I just have a hard time with them anytime that they adapt those things and make the main character talk who didn't talk otherwise, was never voiced. Like Persona 4 and Persona 4 Golden, they adapted into anime, and the main character never spoke in the main game, and they gave him a voice. And I like the voice actor, but I don't like the fact that they gave him a voice. It just worked better without. Anyway, so yeah. Chrono Trigger. That's what I'm going to say. What about you?
Well, first, I definitely agree with the notion of it feels weird and just wrong having silent characters suddenly speak. Like, I've heard that they potentially want to do that with Link, and I'm like, he works so well as a silent character. I mean, considering the fact that barring, like the I guess 80s animated series, or maybe that was the 90s, I don't know. But barring that, and also the CDI games, but barring those rare circumstances, Link has never spoken a single word over the entirety of the franchise. So the fact that they want to give him an actual voice, it's just weird. I mean, granted, I really didn't like when they brought voices over to Breath of the Wild. It just felt weird.
Yeah.
And I really wasn't a fan of that at all. So, but at least Link was silent during that.
Yeah.
So if they decide to at some point give him a voice, outside of then it just takes me out of the game, because I'm like, you're not supposed to do that at all.
See, what would be really funny is if they just made it so that whenever he's speaking, there's just like some other random noise that happens in the background, so you don't actually hear what he's saying. So it's just implied, and then the person responds as though he said something. That would be hilarious. That's the way they should do it, but I know that's not what they're gonna do.
Oh yeah, that would be funny though, seeing that happen. Now, I honestly, regarding the first question, I really had to think about it, and honestly, I could not think of anything at all, because I feel like, for the most part, anything that I would have want to have an adaptation kind of already did, or has some sort of degree of an adaptation, or anything else, I probably feel like it wouldn't translate well over to being a video game. Like, I mean, sure, like most of the comics I want, the characters have their own video games. They might not all be good, but they have, video games here and there. And I mean, other stuff like, Star Wars already has plenty of video games. So, and
Right.
pretty much everything else might have something or something similar enough where I'm like, yeah, it's fine. It might not have, this franchise might not have a video game, but there's something similar or close enough to it where I could say, yeah, that's got a video game there. So I couldn't really answer that one. However, there's definitely a video game I would not want to have an adaptation of. And I feel like you know what this is going to be. And that is Metroid. Because I do not believe that they would do the series justice at all. I mean, I remember some years ago I saw something about the potential of having a Metroid film and also having Brie Larson star as Samus, and I was just like, I don't know about that.
Well, the thing about Brie Larson is before she got into her like really obnoxious phase, like when she was doing Captain Marvel and all that stuff, she was actually pretty good. I mean, like she was great in Scott Pilgrim versus the World. She was fantastic in that. I mean, yeah, it was a relatively small role, but she was pretty great in that. And I mean, from everything I heard of her over the years before she became really obnoxious, it seemed like she actually did play Metroid. And I mean, I think she's got the looks and the build for it well enough. Maybe a little short for Samus, but otherwise, I think she could pull it off. They did do a live action like short adaptation where I think it was Jessica Chobot that played Samus. It was like very short. It was like, a couple minutes long. It was pretty cool though. But yeah, I can understand what you mean. I mean, the reality though is that I think that if they could get the atmosphere well enough and just didn't have her talking all the time, it could be really good. Because there are movies out there where they've done the silent thing, where they have the person where they're basically not talking throughout the whole thing. And it could just be more about the atmosphere. And if they have to have her talk, just have it be very limited. Or talk in Chozo. like they did in Metroid Dread. Just not have it be as bad as it was in Other M, where the voice acting was awful. I liked Other M as a game. I think it was actually a really good game. But I mean, not top tier for Metroid, but it was still solid. Like I really enjoyed it. And I got it for $6. So it's like I played it many years after it came out. But anyway, yeah, I can understand what you mean though.
Yeah, and I mean, don't get me wrong, I do definitely agree that she definitely would be, she definitely could portray Samus. Like I have no doubt at all. Like I heard that, I was like, yeah, I can agree with that. But would I want her to portray her because she might shift things? Because I mean, like, here's the one thing that I feel like people might not understand, like saying like the fact that, Samus is a well-written character. Like it's like they would say like, oh, she needs to be a girl boss. I'm like, no, she gets stuff done. Like she doesn't make that as part of her identity. She just like, she's competent. She does her job well. And that's why she's like the best bounty hunter in the series because of what she does. Right. And like,
exactly,
her being a woman has nothing to do with it. And so I feel like that's something that could possibly be alluded to. And so I was like, you're going to take away the fact that, she's just good at what she does when everyone else isn't as good. And, I do also feel like they might, one reason why I went like is the fact that they might try to like add in subplots that might not necessarily be necessary for the story, when it's just like the stories are pretty much straightforward here and there. Just like go here, wipe out everything in sight, essentially, call it a day, collect your money. I mean, certain stuff might happen that changes things, like the fact with Super Metroid, how you're trying to go rescue the baby, but the baby ends up being a weapon that's used against you, and then things change at the end. But it's a straightforward story, and I mean, most of the games are pretty straightforward. I mean, I would say probably after Fusion, or at least as far as the non-Prime games, after Fusion, it became heavier in story, like especially with Other M,
Yeah.
and even to a degree, Dread.
Dread.
But you know, they in general were pretty straightforward, and they didn't have too many, if any, underlying subplots. So I feel like they would try to inject stuff and sort of like, I feel like they would bog the overall story down if they tried doing that with the Metroid film, which is why I'm like, that's another reason why I wouldn't want them to try to do anything.
That's fair. I did actually think of another thing that I would like to see adapted into a video game, and technically it does already have a video game back on the NES, but I think there's ways that they could make it way better today. And I thought about this years ago and I just forgot about it. Darkwing Duck. Basically make it into a 3D Metroidvania, because Darkwing Duck is basically Batman. So do a 3D Metroidvania with Darkwing Duck. You know, Batman style game. I mean, obviously not as dark as the Batman games because it's a Disney property, but I think that could be fantastic. And I loved Darkwing Duck when I was a kid, so I think that would be a really cool one. Or Batman Beyond would also be cool.
That would
that's
be
obvious. That's an obvious one, but yeah.
Oof. Okay, so now you gave me an idea, and sort of similar to what you said about there technically already being one. But I feel like they could do something again. Would be to have. I mean, it would definitely be next to impossible because he passed away. But if they did a Batman the Animated Series video game, I would be.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I thought of that one too.
Like, especially if they.
In fact,
especially if they did maybe. I mean, I'm trying to decide if having a 2D Metroid, or not necessarily Metroidvania, but if they had a 2D, maybe just like a platformer game, or maybe even having an Arkham style game, but just having that entire aesthetic of the animated series, or something like that.
Yeah, whenever I played Arkham City, I was almost always playing as animated series Batman because I loved those skins that were so good.
Yes.
I mean, granted, they didn't have it for every character, but they had it for Batman and Robin and Catwoman. I don't think they had it for Ivy. And they definitely didn't have it for like Two-Face and stuff. I wish that they had just done a full game. I mean, I would love it if they just had it as true to the animated series as possible, to where, it's dark themed still, but it's not as dark as the Arkham games.
Right.
But then have all the visual style. I would want it to be a 3D one though, because, well, of course the 2D one would be great. I just, after they had those skins in Arkham City, I just was like, man, I would love to see a full game based on animated series. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, and I feel like also, if they could even make it cell shaded too, I feel like, man, it would feel like having the original series just like sort of brought to life in a sense, just because of that third dimension.
Yes, definitely. Absolutely. Well, good stuff. All right. Recommendations and dissuasions. Give me yours.
All right. So my recommendation, or I guess recommendations, are essentially going to be some tips for Wall World, especially if you're getting started and trying to make the most efficient progress as you can. And so that essentially is going to be, when you start off the game, you start the game out in separate biomes, and whenever you cross a cloud barrier that goes into a new biome, don't cross the barriers until you go through all the mines, because you want to have all the resources available to you to improve what you have, and additionally focus on upgrading your mining efficiency. The more efficiency you have with your mining, the easier it is to break through rocks, and as you get through further biomes, it's much harder to drill into them, so you definitely want to pump that up as much as you can as early as possible. Additionally, when you actually make your permanent upgrades, focus first on upgrading your vacuum so that way you can hold more ore, so that we don't have to constantly go back and forth between your ship and from where you last left off, because that will eat up at precious time. So those are my recommendations.
All right, good stuff. Well, I just have one recommendation this week, and that is specifically go with an Asus motherboard for building a PC. I have had nothing but positive experiences with the Asus motherboards, whereas the times that I've tried going with different ones, they've ended up being faulty. And granted, obviously, with the Gigabyte one that I bought, it was used like new, so that was probably a big part of the reason why it was faulty, was because it wasn't technically as new as they said it was. But either way, the Asus motherboards they're laid out way better, and I'm a big fan of those, and they have not steered me wrong. I have the one in my secondary PC, which is from my original build. It's a 9-year-old motherboard, and everything still works great with it. And the one that I had until I updated my PC was also an Asus motherboard. And the one I have in my PC now is an Asus motherboard. So I think that those are great ones to choose. But yeah, that's what I have for my recommendation.
That is definitely good. And also, just out of curiosity, just because I haven't purchased an Asus motherboard, so I don't know if there's anything like this. I know with Gigabyte, they have a sub-brand called, I think, Eors or something like that. Is there any type of thing with Asus that I should, look for to purchase, or just like in general, like Asus motherboards are?
I mean, I've had positive experiences with all three of them, but the one that I got, my last one as well as the one I have right now, are both the Asus ROG Strix motherboards.
Okay.
And so that's what I've been going for. I mean, mostly just because it was like when I decided that I needed to switch back to, when I needed to replace the one that was faulty, I just decided I'm just going to go with one that's laid out exactly the same, and it basically is. So it just made it so much easier to put together. Super duper easy. But yeah, I actually do have one other recommendation. And that is, if you want to make fried rice, make sure that you don't use as much water. I guess it's technically kind of a recommendation / dissuasion. Don't use as much water as the packaging calls for. Well, I should say at least with jasmine rice. When doing with jasmine rice, because jasmine rice, it calls for like 2.5 times the amount of water that you use. And I'd never done it that way before, but I decided to try doing it that way this time because I found that worked pretty well for the basmati rice the last time I made that. But the rice ended up more mushy, and it was just too much moisture, and it really made it difficult to make fried rice with it. It just didn't come out nearly as well as the last time I made it. So yeah. Quick side note, because I forgot to mention it during my update at the beginning, we had a cookout, not cookout, but a potluck at work, and they did a competition with that. I did my Indian curry, and I was the winner on that part of it. They decided to split it between savory and dessert, but I won the savory part. So yeah,
well
good.
Done.
But yeah, I got a $10 Chick-fil-A gift card. It's like, hey, I'll take it. I'll use that. One of the only places I actually go to on a semi-consistent basis. So yeah, but that's what I got for recommendations. So dissuasions.
All right, just one thing for me, and it's something that I forgot to mention last week. And so that is, if you are upgrading your GPU in Linux, and this is primarily going to go for AMD, I'm not certain how it goes for NVIDIA GPUs, but do not remove or do not uninstall the graphics drivers before you update, before you install the GPU. I know traditionally in Windows they say to uninstall your drivers before you install your GPU, but when I was looking up stuff just underneath links to try to figure out how to uninstall the drivers, people said do not do it that way, just because of the fact that if something happens, you'll want to have those drivers back in case you need to reinstall your the old GPU. And additionally, Linux is pretty good with identifying the GPU you have and just automatically uninstalling the old drivers and installing the new drivers when you insert the GPU. In fact, with me, I didn't even need to update my drivers; they were pretty much good to go for the new GPU I put in. So definitely don't uninstall them if you are upgrading for AMD. If you're going from AMD to NVIDIA or NVIDIA to AMD, you probably will have to, change out your drivers, uninstall them. But if you're just upgrading from AMD to AMD, there's no need to do that at all. So don't bother doing that.
Good to know. I mean, I've only ever had NVIDIA. I've only had 2 GPUs. So just the 980, the GTX 980 and the 2080 Ti that I still have. So, but that's still good to know.
Just out of curiosity, what brand 980 do you have?
Both of them are EVGA, which of course doesn't make GPUs anymore.
Yeah,
hence the prices.
Yeah, and it's just funny they mentioned it because I said that because I bought, back in the crisis with the RTX 30 series and trying to secure one then. I bought a GTX 980 because I was like, well, I want to have something just like in the meantime to hold me over. And I bought an EVGA 980. And so I thought, you know what? I'm just curious what type of 980 you had.
Yeah.
But yeah, good stuff.
All right. Well, I have 3 dissuasions today. First of all is do not buy a used motherboard. Even if it says it's like new, don't buy a used one. Just spend a little bit of extra money you have. Well, I guess I should say you can buy a used motherboard, but make sure if you're going to do it, make sure you are getting a good look at it. I think it's better to just not do it, but if you really just need to save money, no, I'm just going to say don't buy a used motherboard, period. Just spend a little bit extra if you have to. Put that into your PC budget, but don't buy a used one, at least not on its own. Now, if it's like a used one that comes with the other parts, comes with the CPU, comes with the RAM, because most of the time that's going to be what people will have. That's a different story, I think, because when it's obvious that this is just this was part of their original build and they had to upgrade. But I wouldn't buy it on its own because there's a very decent chance that it could be faulty in some way or another. But then also I'm going to say do not switch motherboard brands if you're using the same case and cables for your upgrade. Just because of the fact that if you're switching brands, you're probably going to end up with a completely different layout. And so, I mean, you can, it's just that you may end up with the same situation that I did where the layout was so different that it was difficult to get cables to go where they needed to go. And it's just, if you stick with the same brand, you're going to have a much easier time being able to get all your cables into your board and not have to completely pull out all your cables and rethread everything in order to get it working properly. For me, that just wasn't even realistic because of where my hard drives are placed in my case. And so it's that's really the only place where I can have the cables come through the only place that I can have the cables come through to get to the power supply is near the bottom. And that's also where my hard drives are, which means I can't just have the cables go in through there to, where I currently have the hard drives in order to make it so that they don't take up so much space inside the case. But yeah, I just think it's better to not switch brands if you can help it, unless you've just had a bad experience. So, though I will say it wasn't actually too bad when I did it on the MSI board. Just unfortunately, the MSI board was faulty and did not last long. So, wasn't even worth it. I mean, that one at least I had working for a while. It just first RAM slots stopped working, and then I started having other issues with it, constantly crashing on me. And then as soon as I switched to a new Asus motherboard, I didn't have issues anymore with that. So, but then the last dissuasion on this front is, do not try to overclock your PC without either being absolutely sure you know what you're doing or getting some help from someone who does. Because it can be really stressful if you accidentally mess something up. I mean, ultimately it wasn't difficult to fix. It was just, at the time, I didn't know how simple it would be, and so it definitely was very stressful. But yeah, that's what I have.
Very, very good pieces of advice to have. I'll definitely keep that in mind in the future.
All right. Well, where can people find you?
They can find my channel, I am Xeracon, that's IAMXERACON, so youtube.com/@IamXeracon. No new videos this past week, obviously, but this week I'm hopefully aiming for, by Thursday, maybe Wednesday, should definitely have a new video out discussing the new, the different type of GameCube that I have and just seeing what that can do. But yeah, that should be interesting.
Very nice. I think I know exactly what it is, but yeah, that's cool. I'm looking forward to seeing that. So you can find me on both YouTube and Rumble. On YouTube, it's at the Frozen Gamer 87 for my gaming channel. Rumble, it doesn't have a custom URL, but I do have the same name for my channel. No content is posted on my Rumble channel yet for that, because I just haven't had a chance to get to it, but there is some on one of the other channels, which I'll get to. However, this Friday, March 21st, as long as I'm still feeling well, I will be doing my 24-hour Extra Life stream. This is my 6th year doing it, and I'll be doing that starting 9 a.m. Central Time and going until 9 a.m. Central Time the next day. So be sure to stop by and check that out if you get a chance. I will say, probably to my nephews who are listening, more likely than not, most of the games I'm playing are not going to be kid friendly, but I will post when I'm doing stuff with the kids, so that way you know that's a time when it's perfectly fine to watch. So yeah, but there's that, and beyond that, I mean, I've already determined that I am going to be, as I posted on my channel, doing 2 more comparisons for the OLED Switch and OLED Steam Deck, and then after that, it's going to be the Steam Deck versus the Switch 2 for all comparisons after that. So, apart from maybe, you know, like one-offs here and there, if I can find the time to do things for, like, comparing Diablo 1 on the 3DS versus the Steam Deck, or the 3DS versus the Vita, or something like that, you know. Just kind of like fun one-offs that most people probably won't even watch, but I just do for the fun of it. But anyway, and then I also have my YouTube cooking channel, Not Authentic But Delicious. That's at NABD Cooking. No new videos up for a few weeks now, I think. Eventually I'll start getting stuff up, but it's not going to be until at least after I do my Extra Life stream, and then it'll be going up both on Rumble and YouTube. Same channel, just not with the custom URL on Rumble. Oh, and I do want to mention with the Extra Life stream, most likely it's not going to be done on Rumble, only because I have not had a chance to figure out how to get that all set up, and unless I can find what I need in order to make that happen, more likely than not, it's just going to be YouTube this time, and then I'll aim for doing it multi-streaming when I do my stack up stream in the fall. So, but then I also have, we have the YouTube channel for the podcast, also on Rumble, the Orange Box Podcast. In the case of YouTube, it's at the Orange Box Podcast. There, of course, we have the video version of the podcast every week. Normally goes up 7 a.m. Central Time, though with issues that we've been having a lot lately, it may end up being more like 9 or 10 a.m. Central Time. Either way, it goes up that same day. There is the Pod Clips channel, which is where we have clips of the various discussion topics posted up, and that is both on YouTube and Rumble. And Rumble actually has more of the recent stuff than YouTube, because I thought that Rumble made it seem like if I post it there and have syndication on YouTube, then it will automatically go to YouTube, but apparently that's not the case, because I got it up on Rumble and it didn't sync over to YouTube, so I just haven't gotten to it yet. But either way, Orange Box Pod Clips, that's just segments for all the different things we talk about, rather than having to go through the full 2.5 hours that we typically talk. So, and that's it for the video stuff. On the audio only side, we have the audio only version of the podcast that goes up on every major podcast platform, normally 12 a.m. Central Time every Friday, although this past week I made the mistake of I forgot to actually wait until it was finished uploading so that I could schedule it to go live, and so it didn't end up going live until like 5 a.m. or something that morning after I got up. So, but yeah, it's on every major podcast platform: Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, Spotify, Deezer, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, all over the place. And yeah, I think that's everything. I guess I haven't been mentioning this, but you can contact us, send us an email, theorangeboxpodcast@gmail.com, or you can send us a tweet on X/Twitter/Twix, as I've heard it called, and just write to us. I'm not active on there at all, but I still would get notifications if anything comes through, so there's that. And obviously you can also just comment on video version of the podcast or on the pod clips. And if you have something that you want to ask us, we will be sure to read it on the podcast. And I think that's everything. So, last chance. Any final thoughts?
No, sir.
All right. Well, I am the Frozen Gamer 87. That is I am Zeracon. We are the Orange Box Podcast. And until next time, kiss a Blarney Stone. Orange Box Podcast.